The Udana and the Itivuttaka, two classics from the Pali Canon. Translation by John D. Ireland. Published in 1997 by Buddhist Publication Society. The Udana, or Inspired Utterances of the Buddha, belongs to the Sutta Pitaka of the Pali Canon. It is the third book of the minor collection, or Khuddaka Nikaya, and found between Dhammapada and the Itivuttaka. The minor or lesser collection, although it is actually quite bulky, is given this name because it is an assortment of miscellaneous texts, most of which were not included in what are regarded as the four main collections, or Nikaya. The Udana consists of 80 discourses, mostly short, divided into 8 sections or chapters, or Vagga. The title Udana refers to the pronouncement, usually in verse, made at the end of each discourse and prefaced by the words, "Then, on realizing its significance, the Lord uttered on that occasion this inspired utterance." In Pali, Atthako Bhagava etang attang viditva tayang velayang imang udanang udanesi. Thus, Udana means an inspired or solemn utterance, spontaneously evoked, literally breathed forth, or udanesi, by the understanding or realization of the significance of the situation or event that occasioned it. Here it is the Buddha who pronounces these utterances, although others are sometimes so inspired. The Udana was first translated into English by D.M. Strong in 1902. A second and better translation was made by F. L. Woodward, and together with his translation of the Itivuttaka was published in Minor Anthologies of the Pali Canon, Volume 2, from Sacred Books of the Buddhists, London, Pali Text Society, 1935. The present translation was attempted because a certain dissatisfaction was felt with Woodward's rendering and style, which is now somewhat dated. The present translator has had the advantage of being able to consult the much improved translations of Pali texts published in recent years, especially those of the late Miss I. B. Horner and the Venerable Bhikkhu Nyanamoli. These and other scholars have made great strides in our understanding of Pali and general Buddhist terminology. The translator was, moreover, able to consult several printed editions of the texts. The PTS, or Pali Text Society edition of the Udana, made by Paul Steinthal in 1889 and used by Woodward, contains so many errors that there is hardly a page without fault. Therefore, during the preparation of this translation, besides Steinthal's text, increasing use was made of the Sinhalese Buddha Jayanti edition and the Nalanda Devanagari text. Neither Steinthal nor Woodward gives titles to the discourses. I have adopted these and the numbering from the Sinhalese edition for easier reference. Several other works were consulted, in particular the commentary, or Paramattadipani, composed by Acharya Dhammapala in perhaps the 6th century Common Era, which was useful when difficulties were encountered and for help in preparing many of the notes. Venerable Nyanamoli's translation of the Nittipakarana, entitled The Guide, was quite invaluable. The Netti quotes nearly a third of the Udanas, and Venerable Nyanamoli's renderings were a great help in understanding several obscure passages. Some remarks must be made regarding a number of terms used in the discourses. The title, Buddha, has mostly been rendered as the Awakened One, but occasionally left untranslated. He is usually referred to as the Lord or Bhagava, and addressed as revered Sir, Bhante, but non-believers refer to him as the good Gautama, Bhogotama, or the recluse Gautama, Samana Gautama. The word Tathagata is obscure in meaning. It is briefly explained as he who has thus tata come, agata, or gone, gata, to enlightenment, or he who has arrived at the truth, tata, as former Buddhas have done. It is most often used by the Buddha when referring to himself obliquely, but here in our text it is several times used by the Venerable Ananda. The Buddha is also referred to as the Sugata, literally meaning well gone. Brahmin is the name for a member of the priestly caste in Indian society. In another, specifically Buddhist sense, it is used of an enlightened person, an arhat, a perfected one who has realized the goal. The Buddha is occasionally referred to as a Brahmin. A bhikkhu is an ordained member of the Buddhist Sangha, or the monastic order. The word could possibly have been rendered as monk. Bhikkhuni, on the other hand, is an ordained woman, a nun. A group of words left untranslated are those referring to non-human beings, such as devata, occasionally deva, naga, yakha, asura, gandhabba, etc., for which there are no real equivalents in English. Devata could perhaps be translated as God, but these are not immortal gods. They are rather beings who are born and die like other beings. And although they may live much longer and have greater powers than humans, they are still of this world. Sakka is the ruler of the Devas and lives in great splendor with his consort Suja in the Tavatimsa, or the heaven of the 33. Asuras live in the ocean and are said to be at war with the Devas. Gandhabas are a kind of heavenly musicians. Names of persons and places have often been left untranslated, or only partly translated, as is the usual practice. By far, the largest number of discourses occur at Savatthi, either in the Jeta wood or in Migara's mother's mansion. Jeta wood was donated by Anathapindika, a rich merchant of Savatthi, who bought the land from Prince Jeta and built the monastery where the Buddhas spent the greatest number of rains retreats. Migara's mother's mansion was donated by the woman lay follower Visakha, who often visited the Buddha when he was staying there. The mansion, or palace, was given to her by her father-in-law, Migara, another rich merchant of Savatthi. Dhamma is a word of wide meaning, the sense of which cannot be adequately conveyed by a single equivalent, for it means different things in different contexts. Such meanings as truth, reality, natural state, law, norm, ideal, morality, the teaching of the Buddha, and religion in general indicate its wide range of applications. In the discourses of the Buddha, it most often means the Buddha's teaching, and specifically the doctrine of dependent arising, or paticca samuppada, the uniquely Buddhist theory of conditionality. This doctrine holds that things arise and cease, not from one cause, but from the presence or absence, the influence or cessation of several conditioning factors. Formally expressed in the formula found in the first discourses of the Udana, the doctrine is referred to obliquely elsewhere, and actually permeates and underlies all the teachings of the Buddha. There are a number of technical terms that have been translated but need some further explanation. The largest number occur in the formula of dependent arising, which offers a detailed exposition of the second and third of the Four Noble Truths, the origination and cessation of suffering, or dukkha. Ignorance, or avidya, is not knowing the Four Noble Truths concerning suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the Noble Eightfold Path leading to the cessation of suffering. It is the non-knowledge of awakening and of the practices for realizing it. Due to this ignorance, there arise volitional activities, sankhara, good and bad, wholesome and unwholesome, deeds or actions, kamma, physical, verbal, and mental, which lead to results, or vipaka, literally meaning ripening or fruit, proper to the moral quality of the action. According to the Buddha, it is the conscious impulse, or volition, or cetana, that is the actual kamma. As a result of past volitional activities, there arises consciousness, or vijnana, beginning with the first moment of consciousness, linking the past and present moments, and dependent on this arises name and form, or namarupa, or mind and body, i.e. feeling, perception, and other mental states along with physical form, composed of the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and air, which stand for extension, cohesion, heat, and motion, and their derivatives. The sixfold base, or salayatana, consists of the five sense faculties and the mind, which exist and function in dependence on name and form. Contact, or phassa, is the coming together of an internal sense faculty with its respective external base or sense object, visible forms, sounds, etc. Ideas being the object of the mind base. Here we read, dependent upon the eye and visible objects, visual consciousness arises. The coming together of these three is called contact, and similarly with the other senses. Feeling, or vedana, which may be pleasurable, painful, or neutral, arises through this contact. Dependent upon feeling, there arises craving, or tanha, which is threefold: sensuous craving, or kama tanha, or the desire to experience sense objects, craving for continued being, or bhava tanha, and craving for non-being, vibhava tanha. The next factor, grasping, or upadana, is the seizing and clinging to what was craved, and thus the natural outcome of craving. There are four kinds of grasping: at sense pleasures, views, external religious observances, and the idea of self. From grasping arises being, or bhava, becoming or existence in the three realms of existence, that of the sensuous, of form, and of the formless realms. Craving, grasping, and being are the present activities, or kamma, that lead to future birth and the repetition of the whole process, the round, or vata, of births and deaths, samsara. The Udana mentions cutting the round, and the point at which it is cut is feeling, by not allowing craving to arise in response to this feeling. Another important word is nibbana, the final aim of all Buddhist endeavor. By studying the contexts in which it occurs, some idea may be formed of what it signifies. Parinibbana, or final nibbana, is the term used to describe the death of the Buddha and the enlightened disciples. One who is enlightened, the Arahant, is said to have gotten rid of the taints, asava, of sensual desire, kama, being, bhava, views, ditthi, and ignorance, avidya. The four taints are also called the four bonds, yoga, and the four floods, ogha, or having crossed over the flood. Similar to the taints are the four poisonous darts or barbs, salla, of passion, hate, conceit, and delusion. Defilements, or kilesha, is another term for various mind-defiling things, as are the fetters, sangyojana, hindrances, nivarana, swellings, ussada, etc. All these terms are to be found in the Udana. Besides the Arahat, there are three other types of noble disciples, Arya Savaka, who are progressing on the path towards this final stage. These are the stream enterer, who is said to be reborn 7 times at most before realizing Nibbana, the once returner, who will be reborn in the sense sphere only one more time, and the never returner, or non-returner, who makes an end to samsara after taking rebirth in the pure abodes of the form realm. This, then, is a brief explanation of some of the terms that will be met in the translation. Others will be explained in the notes. The prose passages which precede the inspired utterances of the Udana may be regarded as a type of commentary, supplying the introductory circumstances to the essential teachings found in the utterances themselves. The latter, being so brief and concise, and most often in verse, present numerous difficulties to the translator. Being expressions of the Buddha's teaching, they allow for a wider interpretation than the circumstances surrounding them suggest. Sometimes the utterances do not appear to fit neatly into the context in which they are set, though in other cases the story and the Udana are integral to each other. Some Udanas can be interpreted at different levels, and some have multiple meanings and allusions that tend to be lost in translation. As well as being uplifting and inspiring, the stories from the Udana also reveal much humor. For example, the response of Nanda on being asked to compare those pink-footed nymphs with the Sakyan girl, the loveliest in the land. Again, in the story of Suttavasa, when the Buddha elicits from her the response that she would like another 7 sons, despite the trouble and pain she had to undergo to produce just one, all forgotten in the pride of motherhood. And then there is the incongruity of a newborn baby being able to hold a conversation. These and other subtle touches reveal the inspiration, humor, joy and delight, and devout faith as well, of those ancient and unknown storytellers who collected and put together this literature. Also noticeable is their love of puns and allusions, the wordplay and the ingenuity involved. Thus we have examples of such a pun on Sangamaji's name, and in the bull-elephant story, the play on the word naga, meaning both perfected one, such as an arahat, and elephant. In this last is also the charming touch of the elephant bringing water for the Lord's use with his trunk. Then there are the similes and parables, like that of the blind man and the elephant, that are both entertaining and instructive. Although this parable may be better suited to Jainism than to Buddhist doctrine, a theory of partial truth being somewhat un-Buddhistic, the story is probably older than both and is still used today by modern Hindu teachers. The thought processes of the compilers of the Pali Canon are also revealed when it is discovered that there is a connection between two adjacent suttas, although this may not be obvious at first sight. One example in the Udana is between suttas 5.8 and 5.9, where a reference to Devadatta's schism is followed in the next sutta by the inclusion of a verse that is found elsewhere, as in Itivuttaka, 1st chapter, 349, in the context of the Kosambi rift. Other examples may be found in the Anguttara Nikaya. These connections are often so well hidden that great ingenuity is needed to discover them. They would also constitute necessary aids to memory in an oral literature and an indication of how it was gradually put together, a word or phrase in one sutta acting as a cue or trigger for the next. Also to be found are connections and allusions within the same sutta that are not at first obvious, some so subtle that one could be forgiven for thinking they are accidental rather than deliberate. An example is contained in Udana 5.4. What is more natural for little boys caught out in some misdemeanor, such as tormenting fish in a pond, by a passerby, than to attempt to run away, as is suggested in the last line of the verse. If you have done a bad deed or do one now, you will not escape pain, though you try to flee. Another device the ancient compilers of the canon have employed is the occasional interposing of lines of explanatory narrative prose with verse that repeats what was previously said in prose. This has been done in the Chunda Sutta, heightening the solemnity of the events being described with dramatic effect. This sutta also has a number of curious features. It consists of 4 separate pieces, actually 4 short suttas that have been strung together. Could the Udanas have once existed as a collection apart from the introductory discourses, like the verses of the Dhammapada? These verses are also described as Buddha Udanas, but the stories supplied to explain when and where they were spoken are found in the commentary and are not reckoned as the word of the Buddha. In the first chapter of the Udana utterances form a group united by the common word Brahmin, which is obvious when they are read apart from the introductory discourses. So this chapter could well have been called Brahmanavagga, following on from the last chapter of the Dhammapada. Similarly, the second chapter has the unifying theme of sukha, or happiness, bliss, the opposite of dukkha. However, in the subsequent chapters, there is often no discernible theme linking the utterances. The Udana is an anthology, many pieces being taken from elsewhere in the Pali Canon, with no obvious systematization except for that mentioned above. However, the beginning of the first chapter does deal with the start of the Buddha's career beneath the Bodhi tree, and the last chapter contains material also to be found in the Mahaparinibbana Suttanta of the Digha Nikaya, number 16, which recounts the last days of the teacher before he passed away. And the final Udana utterance, 8.10, is a fitting ending to the whole work. It is worth mentioning that in order to gain the most out of reading or listening to these suttas, one needs to also look at the notes that the author, in this case the translator, John D. Ireland, had meticulously placed in the notes section. These different footnotes enable the listener, in this case, to benefit by finding out more details, the backstory, as it were, as well as the commentarial notes that have been carefully selected and incorporated within the notes section that help us to find out more about the circumstances and events, as well as the contextual factors underlying each of these utterances within each of these suttas in the Udana.